Part of the reason that people go watch anti-heroes and villains is because there's a part of them crying out for the incorporation of the monster within them, which is what gives them strength of character and self-respect, because it's impossible to respect yourself until you grow teeth. And if you grow teeth, then you realize that you're somewhat dangerous, or maybe somewhat seriously dangerous, and then you might be more willing to demand that you treat yourself with respect and other people do the same thing. And so that doesn't mean that being cruel is better than not being cruel. What it means is that being able to be cruel and then not being cruel is better than not being able to be cruel. Because in the first case, you're nothing but weak and naive. And in the second case, you're dangerous, but you have it under control. And you know, a lot of martial arts concentrate on exactly that as part of their philosophy of training. It's like, we're not training you to fight. We're training you to be peaceful and awake and avoid fights. But if you happen to have to get in one, and I guess the philosophy also is that if you're competent at fighting, that actually decreases the probability that you're going to have to fight, because when someone pushes you, you'll be able to respond with confidence, and with any luck, and this is certainly the case with bullies, with any luck, a reasonable show of confidence, which is very much equivalent to a show of dominance, is going to be enough to make the bully back off. And so the strength that you develop in your monstrousness is actually the best guarantee of peace. And that's partly why Jung believed that it was necessary for people to integrate their shadow. And he said that was a terrible thing for people to attempt, because the human shadow, which is all those things about yourself that you don't want to realize, reaches all the way to hell. And what he meant by that was, it's through an analysis of your own shadow that you can come to understand why other people are capable, and you as well, of the sorts of terrible atrocities that characterized, let's say, the 20th century. And without that understanding, there's no possibility of bringing it under control. It's also partly why the path to enlightenment and wisdom is seldom trod upon, because if it was all a matter of following your bliss and doing what made you happy, then everyone in the world would be a paragon of wisdom. But it's not that at all. It's a matter of facing the thing you least want to face. The gateway to wisdom and the gateway to the development of personality, which is exactly the same thing, is precisely through the portal that you do not want to climb through. And the reason for that's actually quite technical. This is a Jungian presupposition too, is that, well, there's a bunch of things about you that are underdeveloped, and a lot of those things are because there's things you've avoided looking at because you don't want to look at them, and there's parts of you you've avoided developing because it's hard for you to develop those parts. And so it's by virtual necessity that what you need is where you don't want to look, because that's where you've kept it. So imagine this. So picture this. So you're driving somewhere in your car. Maybe you want to go visit your girlfriend. Okay, so you want to see her. So now you're in this frame, right? And the goal is the destination point and what's waiting there. And the map obviously includes your car. So you see your car, you're inside it, you see your car, you think you see your car, but you don't. And you don't even want to. Part of what car designers do is make it unnecessary for you to see the car. See, they cover the whole car with a homogeneous shell. That's like a 1 pixel image. And that's so that you don't get discomforted by the complexity of the car. And the car, the 1 pixel representation of the car, which is this shiny outer shell, is perfectly appropriate as long as the car works. Because you can reduce it to nothing. You can reduce it to an assumption. Okay, so now you're driving to see your girlfriend and a warning light goes on in the dash. Well, what's happening is the implicit complexity of the automobile has just revealed itself to you. And it's threatening the integrity of your map. And that's destabilizing your emotions. And the reason they destabilize is because you've entered a high entropy state. You were in a low entropy state where everything was certain. You could get from point A to B, and you knew exactly how to do that. You knew exactly how much energy it was going to take, and you knew how much time it was going to take. And all of a sudden, something has emerged from the chaos that underlies everything, the complex chaos that underlies everything, and it's signaling to you. And what does it signal? Well, part of what it signals is your unbelievable stupidity in relationship to your car. Because when I was your age, I could sort of understand a car, and if something went wrong with it, I could sort of maybe fix it, and probably not, but at least I could understand it. But now it's like, forget it. All that electronics, you can't even get at it. And so the light goes on, and see what happens now is the map has now become of indeterminate length. How many steps is it going to take you to get to where you were going? Well, it depends on how serious the issue is with your car. Well, that's where your mind starts to go. It's like, well, how serious is this? Should I buy a new car? Was I an idiot when I bought this car to begin with? Am I going to be able to afford this? Am I going to get taken for a ride by a malevolent mechanic because I'm ignorant? And so there's a whole problem of ethics immediately emerges as well. Because now the car doesn't work, but that means you might have to have an encounter with untrustworthy pseudo helpers, and that's also another revelation of your own insufficiency and ignorance, because maybe you're so naive that you're easily fleeced and you're just a walking target for that sort of thing. And all of that pops up. It's the Hydra, it's the Medusa, it's the snakes that are everywhere. They pops up and freezes you. That happens all the time in life, and that's part of what I was writing about in Maps of Meaning. And so then the question is, how do you deal with all those snakes? That's the permanent question. You're permanently susceptible to the radical disruption of your low entropy maps. Permanently susceptible to that. Well, you can't build a map that isn't susceptible to that. So what do? You build yourself into someone who can deal with the anomalous. And that's the hero who faces the dragon. I often don't very well, and doubt my ability to stand up for myself in discussions and aggressive situations. How do I know when I've incorporated my shadow? Practice makes perfect. One thing you could do is start keeping track of situations like that, where you walk away thinking that you should have said something. And so then I would say, write down the situation and then think through and write down what you think you should have done. And then, because that's going to help you be sharper on the draw and more ready so write down the situation, write down what you think you should have done. Then sit and imagine the situation as vividly as you can, right? Get the pictures in your head and imagine yourself doing that, and try to get the psychophysiological responses up as well, so that you make it as realistic as possible, and that will actually help you practice. So Edna Foa, who's a very good clinical psychologist, has demonstrated quite clearly that when treating post-traumatic stress disorder, for example, if you get people to sit and imagine being back in the stressful situation, they have to do that voluntarily, and after at least 18 months after the trauma. And she did psychophysiological recording of heart rate and skin conductance and that kind of thing. She showed that the people who showed the highest levels of stress reactivity to the reimagining were the ones who got better fastest and stayed better longest. So you have a situation that you haven't mastered. Define the situation repeatedly. Define your proper action repeatedly. Practice implementing that in your imagination, and then start to do that in your real life, and that'll see, if you write down what you should have said, you'll find out what you really want and what you really think, and that'll be your shadow talking. That's the best way to think about it, is that the part of your brain that wishes it would have done something different is the shadow associated with the aggression, whose integration would strengthen your character.